A millionaire orchestrates a blind date for a young housemaid, but when she finally sees who her match is, shock and emotion make her break down in tears, revealing a secret connection and the promise of a future that defies all expectations. The air in the restaurant was thick, perfumed with notes of truffles and aged wine, a stark contrast to the smell of disinfectant and cleaning products So-yeon knew so well. Every gleaming piece of silverware, every crystal glass on the meticulously set table seemed to scream at her that she was out of place. Dressed in her best dress, a birthday gift from her mother years ago, So-yeon felt like an intruder on a grand stage, her heart beating an anxious rhythm against her ribs. The hostess, with a polished smile, guided her to a more secluded table, where a male silhouette already awaited her. The dim, ambient light created a play of shadows, but as she approached, the profile became unmistakable. The impeccable cut of the dark suit, the erect posture, the aura of silent authority. It couldn't be. Her step faltered. The man stood up, and the face revealed under the soft light made So-yeon's world spin. Lee Min-jun, the CEO. The man she caught glimpses of in the mansion's corridors, in hurried meetings, or occasionally with a distant gaze as she dusted his luxurious life. The man who, in her mind, was the epitome of an unattainable world. He was there, waiting for her, her match on the blind date. The revelation hit So-yeon like lightning. It wasn't just surprise, but a profound shock that reverberated through every fiber of her being. All the times she had seen him, all the silent humiliations she had endured while he was nearby, all the hours of exhaustion that led her back to her mother's hospital bed, all of it surged to the surface in a whirlwind. Her eyes welled up instantly. Tears, which she had held back so fiercely for so long, now streamed uncontrollably, hot and abundant, tracing paths down her cheeks. They weren't just tears of shock, but of an overwhelming mix of relief, confusion, and the incomprehensibility of a fate that suddenly seemed to have turned its face towards her. It was as if the invisible weight of her life had been suddenly acknowledged, not by a stranger, but by him, the man who represented the insurmountable distance between their worlds. Lee Min-jun watched her with an expression So-yeon couldn't quite decipher. There was a serene calm, but also a depth of understanding that disarmed her even further. He didn't seem surprised by her tears, as if he had expected them. "So-yeon-si," he said, his voice deep and soft, without a hint of judgment. "Please, sit." He pulled out a chair for her, a chivalrous gesture that in any other circumstance would have made her blush. But now all she felt was the uncontrollable tremor in her hands and the shame of her own exposed fragility. She sat, her body rigid, unable to lift her eyes to meet his. The tears continued to fall, dampening the fabric of her dress. Min-jun extended an impeccable white linen handkerchief across the table. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice still calm, but with a note of genuine concern. So-yeon took the handkerchief, the touch of the soft, expensive fabric in her fingers almost as strange as the situation. She shook her head, unable to form words. How could she be all right? Her silent guardian, the man she barely dared to look in the eyes at the mansion, was there, in front of her, as her match on an arranged date. What did all this mean? What did he know? What did he want? The silence that followed wasn't entirely uncomfortable, but it was laden with a palpable tension of unasked questions and even more complex answers. So-yeon wiped her tears, desperately trying to compose herself. But the lump in her throat was stubborn. The promise of a future that defied all expectations hung in the air, as frightening as it was hopeful. She finally dared to lift her eyes, meeting Lee Min-jun's firm and patient gaze, and for a fleeting moment, she thought she saw a spark of something more, perhaps compassion, perhaps something deeper, in the CEO's eyes. Zoyon finally dared to lift her eyes, meeting Lee Min-jun's firm and patient gaze. He didn't look away, and the intensity of his attention made her feel even more exposed, yet, strangely, also seen in a way she had never experienced. "So, Yunxi," he repeated, his voice maintaining its calm, but now with a softness that seemed to want to untie the knot in her throat. "I understand this must be unexpected." Unexpected was an understatement. It was as if the ground had vanished beneath her feet. She clutched the handkerchief in her hands, feeling its fine texture and the subtle scent of elegant men's cologne that wasn't the disinfectant or soap she used daily. "Mr. Lee," she managed to whisper, her voice hoarse and choked with tears. It was the first time she had called him by name outside the context of the CEO or the boss. The title felt strange, out of place in that intimate setting. I don't understand." Min-jun inclined his head slightly, a gesture that seemed to convey understanding. "I know, and I apologize for the way this unfolded. It was not my intention to cause you distress." He paused, his eyes fixed on hers, as if measuring each word. "This meeting, it's not a coincidence, So-yeon-si. I was the one who arranged it." The confession hit So-yeon with a fresh wave of shock. He arranged it. He knew. He chose her. But why? What could he want from her, a simple housemaid burdened by debts and worries? The shame of her situation, her poverty, her ailing mother, all seemed to magnify under his gaze. "But why?" she asked, her voice almost inaudible, yet laden with desperate confusion. I am your maid. How is this possible?" Min-jun sighed softly, an almost inaudible sound. "I have observed you, So-yeon-si, not in an inappropriate way, I assure you, but I have seen you, your dedication, your resilience, the dignity with which you face your daily struggles, even when no one else is looking." He made a vague gesture with his hand, encompassing the luxurious surroundings. "This world can be cruel, and I felt compelled to intervene." His words were a balm and a knife at the same time. He had seen her, he knew, the humiliation of being observed in her most vulnerable moments, but also the overwhelming relief of finally being recognized. He wasn't talking about her appearance, her beauty, but about something deeper, something she thought no one would ever notice, her indomitable spirit. "My mother." The word escaped before she could contain it. It was the root of all her pain, all her effort. Min-jun's eyes softened even further. "I know about your mother, So-yeon-si, and about the hospital debt." That revelation was the final blow. He knew everything. Not only had he seen her, but he had investigated her life, her heaviest burdens. The tears returned, but this time they were different. They weren't just tears of shock or shame, but of a gratitude so profound it choked her. It was as if, for the first time in years, she wasn't alone. Her silent guardian wasn't a fantasy, but a tangible reality sitting in front of her. "I don't want you to think this is a game, So-yeon-si," Min-jun continued, his voice firm, yet gentle. "It's not a whim. It's an invitation to a life of respect, of care, a life where you don't have to carry the weight of the world alone." He extended his hand across the table, not to touch her, but as an open gesture. "I want to help you, if you will allow me." So-yeon looked at his hand, at the table, at his face. The proposal was so grand, so beyond her comprehension, that it seemed unreal. A millionaire, the CEO, offering her a life of respect and care. Why her? Why now? The fear of the unknown was immense, but the promise of relief, the hope of a future without the constant shadow of debt and exhaustion, was even greater. She couldn't speak, but her eyes, still tear-filled, conveyed a torrent of questions, of disbelief, and above all, of a newfound hope that trembled in her chest. The silence returned, but this time it was a silence of possibilities, of a threshold between two worlds that had just collided. So-yeon's trembling fingers barely brushed his. Min-jun's skin was warm and firm, a contrast to the coldness of her own hands. It wasn't a clasp, but an acknowledgement, a silent vow that echoed the promise of a new path. The touch, however brief and hesitant, seemed to seal an incomprehensible pact. She withdrew her hand almost immediately as if she'd been burned, but the sensation persisted, a residual warmth in her palm. Min-jun didn't react with surprise or disappointment. An almost imperceptible glint of satisfaction passed through his eyes, a sign that he had understood the gesture. He didn't pressure her, just kept his gaze fixed on her, the patience in his expression an invitation for her to speak. I don't know what to say, Mr. Lee, So-yeon repeated, her voice still weak, but now with a hint of determination. It's such a generous offer, but I can't accept charity, and I don't want to be a burden. The word burden came out with a bitterness she couldn't hide. It was what she felt she was to everyone, especially her mother. Min-jun inclined his head slightly. It's not charity, So-yeon-si, and you are not a burden. Never have been. He paused, as if choosing his words carefully. I understand your hesitation. It's natural, but I ask that you view this as an opportunity for you to break free from the chains that bind you, and for your mother to receive the care she deserves. But why me? She insisted, the question pounding in her mind. There are so many people. Why would you choose to help me? I'm nobody. You are not nobody, So-yeon-si, Min-jun replied, his voice soft yet firm. You are a woman of unwavering strength and dignity, and as I said, your story touched me. I couldn't ignore it. Think of it as a debt that life gave me a chance to repay. Not to you, but to the idea that kindness and resilience should be rewarded, not crushed. He leaned in a little closer, the seriousness on his face deep. I don't see you as a maid, So-yeon-si. I see you as a person who deserves more than life has given you so far, and I have the means to offer that. So-yeon felt a lump in her throat. His words were so different from anything she had ever heard. She was used to being invisible, or to being seen only as a means to an end. To be seen for her essence, for her strength, was something new and frightening. And my mother's debt? She asked, her voice almost a whisper. It was the crucial point, the heaviest weight on her heart. Min-jun nodded. I've already made arrangements for the situation to be assessed. Don't worry about it anymore, So-yeon-si. Your mother will receive the best treatment and the debt will be taken care of. The debt will be taken care of. It was as if an entire mountain had been lifted from her shoulders. The air she breathed felt lighter, purer. The tears returned, but this time they were tears of a relief so profound it made her tremble. I don't know how to thank you, she managed to say, the words getting lost in a sob. There's no need to thank me, Min-jun said, extending his hand again, this time to gently push the tissue box on the table closer to her. Just allow me to help you. Allow yourself to accept this help. So-yeon took a tissue, wiping her eyes. The reality still felt like a dream, but Min-jun's solid presence in front of her, the promise of relief for her mother, were undeniable. What do I need to do? She asked, her voice firmer now, tinged with a new, albeit cautious, hope. Min-jun smiled, a small, genuine smile that softened his features. For now, just trust me, and allow me to take you home. Tomorrow, we can talk more calmly about the next steps, about your mother, and about what you would like to do with your own life, now that the weight of the debt will no longer be on you. He stood up, an elegant and decisive gesture. What I offer, So-yeon-si, is the freedom of choice, the freedom to dream again. So-yeon looked at him, at the man who in a single meeting had turned her world upside down. The freedom to dream. It was a phrase she hadn't heard in years. The fear was still there, a persistent shadow, but the light of hope was undeniably stronger. She stood up too, feeling her legs a little shaky, but with a new resolve in her heart. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, it wasn't just darkness. Minjun stood up, and So-yeon followed him, her legs still a little shaky. The restaurant, once a stage for her humiliation and then for a shocking revelation, now seemed a surreal setting. Every clinking fork, every muffled laugh from other patrons, all seemed distant, muffled by the storm of emotions within her. She felt Minjun's eyes on her, not with judgment, but with a kind of gentle expectation. "Is everything all right, So-yeon-si?" he asked, his voice low, almost inaudible in the ambient hum. She nodded, unable to form words. Just the idea that he would take her home, to her small, humble dwelling, was already an affront to her dignity. How would he react to seeing the reality of her life? The shame, which had been temporarily suppressed by the wave of relief, began to creep back. Minjun, as if reading her thoughts, made a subtle hand gesture towards the exit. "Don't worry about anything, just follow me." They walked side by side, the distance between them a social chasm, but the physical proximity strangely comforting. The cold, soul night air hit her as they exited the restaurant, a welcome shock that helped clear her mind. A sleek black car, which she recognized as the same one that had brought her, waited at the curb. The driver opened the door for her. So-yeon hesitated for an instant, her hand on the door handle before getting in. The car's interior was luxurious, with soft leather upholstery and a silence that seemed to absorb any sound from the outside world. Minjun sat beside her, and the car pulled away smoothly. The journey was made in almost absolute silence. So-yeon looked out the window, watching the city lights pass by, each a reminder of the distance between Minjun's world and hers. She felt his gaze occasionally, but didn't dare return it. Her mind was in a whirlwind, her mother's debt, the treatment, the promise of freedom. Was it real? Could it be? "Is the address you gave me correct?" Minjun asked, breaking the silence, his voice calm. "Yes, Mr. Lee," she replied, her voice almost a whisper. She felt her cheeks flush with shame at the thought of her small house, so different from the palaces he inhabited. "There's no need for excessive formalities, So-yeon-si," he said gently. "Minjun is sufficient, if you feel comfortable." She didn't answer. The idea of calling him by his first name seemed an unthinkable boldness. The car turned onto a narrow street, then another, until it stopped in front of her house. It was an old house, with peeling paint and a small, neglected garden. The faint porch light barely illuminated the entrance. So-yeon felt a tightness in her chest. This was where she lived, where her daily struggles unfolded. So-yeon got out, feeling Minjun's gaze on her. He also stepped out of the car, stopping beside her without showing any sign of repulsion or surprise. His expression was the same as always, calm, attentive. "We've arrived, So-yeon-si," he said. "Please rest. Tomorrow I will contact you so we can discuss the details. Don't worry about anything tonight." She looked at him, at the man who had promised to lift the weight of the world from her shoulders. The gratitude was so overwhelming it choked her. "Mr. Lee, I really don't know how to—" He raised his hand, interrupting her gently. "There's no need for words now. Just trust, and please don't feel ashamed. Your house is a home, and that's what matters." His words, spoken with such sincerity, touched her deeply. No one had ever validated her home, her existence in that way. She felt a new wave of tears, but she held them back. "Good night, So-yeon-si," he said, before turning and getting back into the car. The driver closed the door, and the car pulled away as silently as it had arrived, disappearing into the darkness of the street. So-yeon stood there, on the cold sidewalk, watching the spot where the car had been. The night silence enveloped her, but it was no longer the oppressive silence of her loneliness. There was a new melody, a note of hope that resonated in her heart. She touched the crumpled linen handkerchief in her pocket, a tangible reminder that none of it had been a dream. She entered her house, the familiar smell of mold and old tea enveloping her. The apartment seemed the same, but she wasn't the same. Minjun's promise echoed in her mind, the freedom to dream again. For the first time in years, So-yeon allowed herself to dream of her mother healthy, without pain, to dream of a future where she wasn't exhausted, where she could choose her own path. She knew the road ahead would be uncertain, full of challenges and perhaps more tears, but for the first time she wasn't alone. There was someone who saw her, who valued her, and who was willing to reach out, and that, in itself, was a miracle. She turned on the dim light in the living room, the lamp hanging from the ceiling swaying slightly. The small space, which once felt like an exhausting refuge, now seemed different. Minjun's words, "Your house is a home, and that's what matters," reverberated in her chest. No one ever had spoken of her home with such respect. To others it was just a shack, a reminder of her poverty. But to him it was a home. The dignity he had bestowed upon her with those few words was a balm for wounds she didn't even know were still bleeding. So-yeon walked to the small kitchen, her movements slow and thoughtful. She filled a glass of water but didn't drink. Her eyes scanned the familiar objects, the old pot on the stove, the stack of bills on the table, the calendar with the marked days for hospital payments. The reality of her situation was still palpable, but now a chink of light was opening. Minjun had promised to discuss the details tomorrow. What details would those be? How did he plan to help her? Her mind spun with questions, each more frightening and hopeful than the last. She sat on the cold floor, leaning against the wall, the crumpled linen handkerchief still in her hand. The touch of the fabric was real, proof that it hadn't been a dream. But the magnitude of what was happening was almost incomprehensible. Such a powerful man, so distant from her world, was offering help. Not out of charity, not out of pity, but for something she couldn't yet decipher. He had seen her struggle, her dignity, her soul, and that terrified her as much as it comforted her. The fear that it was all an illusion, a cruel deception, was an old companion. How many times had hope been crushed? How many broken promises? But Minjun's gaze, his calm and firm voice, the way he treated her, all of it seemed genuine. He hadn't recoiled at the sight of her humble home. He hadn't shamed her. On the contrary, he had elevated her. With a deep sigh, So-yeon stood up. She needed to try to sleep. Tomorrow would be a crucial day. She undressed from her simple clothes, putting on her worn-out pajamas. She lay down on the bed, the thin mattress and worn blankets. The night's silence seemed to amplify her heartbeat. She closed her eyes, but the images of the night repeated themselves. The luxurious restaurant, Minjun's serious face, his words, the elegant car, the arrival at her house. Sleep didn't come easily. She tossed and turned, her mind in a whirlwind. With each passing hour, the anxiety grew. What would tomorrow bring? Would it be the end of her nightmare, or the beginning of a new one? She prayed, a silent and desperate prayer, that the hope that had ignited in her heart wouldn't be extinguished. When the first ray of sun crept through the dusty window, So-yeon was already awake. Her eyes were heavy, but her mind was clear, focused on the only thing that mattered, the phone. She got up, the physical exhaustion still present, but now overlaid with a nervous energy. The day had come. The day Minjun would contact her. She felt her stomach churn. What would he say? What would he ask? She didn't know, but she was ready. Or at least she tried to be. But she was ready. The apartment, which the previous night seemed to have absorbed a new aura of hope, now seemed merely waiting. Every familiar object, the stack of bills, the calendar with the days marked in red for hospital payments, the faded photo of her mother, seemed to observe her, awaiting confirmation that the promise of the previous night wasn't a delusion. So-yeon tried to follow her morning routine, but her movements were mechanical, her mind elsewhere. She prepared a weak tea, but the bitter taste didn't comfort her. She cleaned the small table, swept the floor, but her eyes kept darting to the old, dusty landline phone on the wall, and to the simple cell phone she kept charged. Would it be one or the other? At every creak of the neighbor's door, every sound from the street, her heart gave a leap. The anxiety was an electric current coursing through her body. She sat on the floor, near the landline, her legs crossed, Minjun's linen handkerchief still in her pocket. A silent talisman. Would he regret it? Would the sight of her humble home in the light of day make him reconsider? Doubt was a slow poison, corroding the fragile shell of hope that had formed. He was a CEO, a man from a world she could barely imagine. Why would he care about her? The question tormented her. It wasn't beauty, nor wealth, nor influence that she possessed. What had he seen in her? The hours dragged on. The sun rose higher in the sky, bathing the apartment with a light that revealed even more of its simplicity. Lunch passed, and So-yeon barely touched her food. Physical hunger was insignificant compared to her hunger for answers. Then, the sound, the sharp, unexpected ring of her cell phone. So-yeon jumped, her heart pounding. She picked up the device with trembling hands, the screen showing an unknown number. She swallowed hard before answering. "Hello?" Her voice came out weaker than expected. "So-yeon-si?" Minjun's calm, deep voice filled the apartment's silence. It was him. It wasn't a dream. "Mr. Lee," she replied, the formality and automatic reflection of her reverence. "Good afternoon. I hope I'm not disturbing you," he said, his voice unhurried, yet with a gentle authority. "I'd like to know if you would be available to meet again today. There are some details we need to discuss in person, as I promised." "Yes, Mr. Lee, I am available." "Excellent. Where would you feel most comfortable? We could meet at a discreet cafe, or if you prefer, I can send the car to pick you up and we can talk in my office. It's important that it's a place where you feel at ease to speak openly." The mention of his office, or a cafe, made So-yeon hesitate. The office seemed too formal, too intimidating. A cafe, though more neutral, would still expose her to curious glances. But there was something in his voice that encouraged her to be honest. "Mr. Lee," she began, her voice almost a whisper, I would prefer it to be somewhere more private. Perhaps here, if it's not an inconvenience for you." The last part came out as an apology. The idea of Minjun in her apartment again filled her with shame, but also with a strange sense of security. Here, she was on her own territory, however humble. There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. So-yeon held her breath, fearing his reaction. "I understand," he finally said, without a hint of surprise or disapproval in his voice. "Your house is a home, So-yeon-si. There's no inconvenience at all. If you're comfortable, I'll be there in about 30 minutes. "Yes, Mr. Lee, I'll be waiting. See you soon, So-yeon-si." The call ended. So-yeon lowered the phone, her arms still extended, as if Minjun's voice was still there. He would come, to her house, to her home. The dignity he had bestowed upon her the previous night was reaffirmed. He didn't see her as a maid, nor as a pitiable figure. He saw her as a person, with a home, with choices. A new wave of nervousness hit her, but this time mixed with fierce determination. She didn't have much to offer in terms of hospitality, but she would do what she could. She rushed to the small bathroom, splashed cold water on her face, tried to fix her hair, changed into the most presentable clothes she owned, a simple, clean dress. She cleaned the small living room again, tidied the worn cushions. 30 minutes. Time flew and dragged at the same time. She was on the edge of a precipice and Min-jun was about to extend his hand. The fear was still real, but hope now was a burning flame impossible to ignore. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing heart. The future was about to walk through her door. The unmistakable sound of a car stopping on the narrow street made So-yeon's heart pound. It wasn't just any car. She would recognize the smooth, powerful engine of Min-jun's vehicle anywhere. Even if she had only heard it once, she rushed to the window, peeking through a gap in the frayed curtain. There it was, the sleek black car, a stark contrast to the modest houses and old cars of the neighborhood. Min-jun stepped out, impeccable in a dark suit, his presence imposing yet calm. He looked at her house, without a hint of judgment on his face, just a serene determination. So-yeon recoiled from the window, her breath caught in her throat. He was here, in her home. She smoothed her simple dress, feeling inadequate, but the dignity he had bestowed upon her with his words prevented her from hiding. She opened the door before he could knock, an instinctive gesture of hospitality and nervousness. Min-jun stood in the small yard, a thin briefcase in his hand. His eyes met hers, and a slight, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. "So Yeon-si," he said, his voice calm and welcoming, dissipating some of the tension in the air. "Mr. Lee," she replied, her voice a little tremulous. She stepped aside, making room. "Please come in." He nodded and entered, his gaze sweeping the small room with the same absence of judgment as the previous night. The room seemed even smaller with his presence, but he showed no discomfort. "Thank you for receiving me again," he said, stopping in the center of the room. "You're welcome, Mr. Lee," So-yeon murmured, feeling strangely at ease despite the nervousness. "Would you like some tea or water?" He shook his head. "No, thank you, So-yeon-si. I don't want to trouble you. I'm sure you have a lot to do." He gestured to the small worn sofa. "May we sit?" She nodded and sat on the edge of the sofa while Min-jun pulled one of the kitchen chairs, positioning it facing her, maintaining a respectful distance. He placed the briefcase on his lap. "So-yeon-si," he began, his voice serious yet gentle. "As I promised, I'd like to discuss the details of how I can help you. I know your situation is delicate, and I understand it may be difficult for you to accept help, but please listen to me before drawing any conclusions." So-yeon nodded, her hands clasped in her lap, her heart pounding. "I have been following your situation for some time," he continued, his eyes fixed on hers. "Not in an intrusive way, but as someone who has witnessed your struggle and your resilience. I have seen your dedication to your mother, the sacrifice you make daily, and I have seen the dignity with which you carry your burden. The shame of being seen in her misery, mingled with gratitude for being seen in her strength." A solitary tear escaped So-yeon's eye, but she quickly wiped it away. "Your mother," my Min-jun continued, his voice softening slightly, "she needs continuous care, and the hospital debts are an unbearable burden for you. I have obtained some information about her situation, the costs, the necessary treatments, and I would like to offer to fully cover all of your mother's medical expenses, past and future, for as long as she needs it. I fully cover all medical expenses, past and future." It was as if the air had been sucked from her lungs. She blinked, trying to process what she had just heard. Was it real, or was it a cruel dream? "Mr. Lee," she managed to whisper, her voice choked. I can't accept. It's too much. I have no way to repay you." Min-jun leaned in slightly, his expression firm. "So-yeon-si, please. Don't view this as a debt or charity. View it as a gesture of respect. I am not asking for anything in return. I'm offering you the chance to free yourself from this burden so you can focus on caring for your mother and, more importantly, on caring for yourself. He opened the briefcase and took out some documents. I've already made the initial arrangements. The overdue payments will be settled by the end of the day, and a fund will be established to cover all future expenses. You won't have to worry about it again. So-yeon felt her world spin, the weight of years of anxiety, of sleepless nights, of silent humiliations, of every counted penny, of every growing debt. All of it seemed to be magically lifted. An overwhelming wave of relief and disbelief hit her. The tears she had held back for so long finally broke through, hot and abundant, streaming down her face. She couldn't speak, only sob, her hands covering her mouth to muffle the sound. Min-jun watched her in silence, unhurried, unembarrassed. He waited, his presence a pillar of calm amidst her emotional turmoil. When she managed to calm down a little, he spoke again, his voice still soft. I know it's a lot to absorb, So-yeon-si, but this is my intention. I don't want to see you suffer unnecessarily anymore. You deserve a life of dignity and peace. He paused. And there's more. So-yeon lifted her tear-filled eyes, her heart still pounding, but now with a new and terrifying hope. What else could there be? The idea that something more could be offered, beyond that miracle already granted, was almost unbearable. Min-jun watched her for a moment, as if choosing his words carefully. So-yeon-si, I understand that your life has been a constant struggle. You have lived under immense pressure, and this has prevented you from having the opportunity to live fully, to take care of yourself, to have a safe and stable home. He paused, his eyes gentle but firm. I would like to offer you and your mother a new place to live, a safe, comfortable apartment where you can have peace and privacy, without the worries of rent, bills, or the need to expose yourself to draining situations. The words fell upon So-yeon like snowflakes in a desert, each bringing a cold, surreal relief. A new home, without rent, without the daily humiliations of her work, without the constant fear of eviction. It was as if every pillar of her precarious existence was being replaced by something solid and unshakable. Mr. Lee, I don't know what to say, she stammered, tears rolling again. Her voice was a thread, barely audible. It's too much. I can't accept all of this. So-yeon-si, he said, his voice a little more incisive yet still gentle. Please, don't interrupt me. Let me explain my intention. I am not offering this as charity. I am offering it as a means for you to rebuild yourself, so you can have the chance to choose your own path. I believe you have immense potential, a strength that deserves to be nurtured, not crushed by circumstances. He took another document from the briefcase. I have already arranged a rental agreement for an apartment in a quiet and safe neighborhood. It's a place where your mother will have access to good hospitals and where you can live with dignity. And so you don't have to worry about daily expenses while you settle in and decide what you want to do. A monthly amount will be deposited into your account. It's not a salary, So-yeon-si, it's support, an investment in your freedom. So-yeon felt her head spin. Freedom. That word resonated in her chest like a long, silenced bell. Freedom from fear, from exhaustion, from humiliation. It was something she had never dared to dream of. I can't just accept all of this, she managed to say, her voice still choked. I need to work. I can't live off your generosity. Min-jun smiled slightly, a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, but that softened his expression. I understand your reluctance, So-yeon-si. Your dignity is one of the qualities I admire most in you. But think of this as an opportunity for you to dedicate yourself to your mother without the burden of guilt, An opportunity for you to perhaps study, to find a job that fulfills you, or simply to rest and recover. There's no deadline, no demands. The only thing I ask is that you use this chance to build a better life for yourself." He extended the documents to her. "Here are the details of the apartment and the fund. There's no fine print, So-yeon-si. It's a sincere offer." So-yeon looked at the papers, then at Min-jun. Her eyes were filled with an overwhelming mix of gratitude, disbelief, and a pang of fear. Fear that all this was a dream, fear that there was a hidden price she couldn't see. But the sincerity in his eyes, the unwavering calm of his presence, began to dispel her doubts. He wasn't asking for anything, he was giving. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper, the question that had tormented her since the previous night finally escaping her lips. I'm nobody. I have nothing to offer." Min-jun inclined his head slightly, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her hold her breath. "So-yeon-si, you are mistaken. You have an inner strength, a resilience, and a dignity that are rare. I have seen it, and I believe that people like you deserve a chance to prosper, not just to survive." He paused, and an almost indescribable glint passed through his eyes. "And perhaps I'm also seeking something. The chance to make a difference in the life of someone who truly deserves it. The chance to see hope flourish where before there was only despair." He looked at her deeply. "Think about it, So-yeon-si. There's no pressure. But I sincerely hope you accept. It's the first step towards a new life." So-yeon felt the lump in her throat tighten again. Tears streamed freely now, but they were no longer tears of despair, but of a relief so profound it made her tremble. The world she knew was crumbling, but to make way for something she never imagined possible. She couldn't speak, only nodded slowly, her hands trembling as she reached out to take the documents. Min-jun watched her, a small, almost imperceptible sigh of relief escaping his lips. The seed of hope had been planted. So-yeon nodded slowly, her hands trembling as she reached out to take the documents. The paper was cold against her fingers, but the sensation was of an overwhelming warmth spreading through her body. She held the papers as if they were made of glass, afraid they would break, that the illusion would shatter. The tears still streamed, but now they had a different taste, not of bitterness, but of a relief so profound it made her tremble uncontrollably. He waited for her to calm down a little, without pressuring her, his presence a safe harbor amidst So-yeon's emotional storm. "So-yeon-si," he said finally, his voice soft and firm. "I understand it's a lot of information to process at once. There's no need to make any immediate decision or to act now. Just allow yourself to feel the relief. Allow yourself to believe." She lifted her eyes, which were still red and swollen, and tried to speak, but the words got lost in a sob. "Mr. Lee, I don't know how to thank you." He shook his head gently. "There's no need to thank me, So-yeon-si. Just live. Live the life you deserve. Tomorrow morning, one of my lawyers will contact you. He will explain all the details, schedule a visit to the apartment, and arrange everything necessary for your mother. Don't worry about anything. Just follow his instructions." The mention of a lawyer and an apartment visit made everything even more real. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't an empty promise. It was a plan, with concrete steps. "Your mother," Min-jun continued, his voice taking on a more practical tone, "she can be transferred to a hospital with better resources if she wishes, or we can ensure she receives the best possible treatment where she is. The decision is yours, So-yeon-si. You will have the power of choice now." Power of choice, that was another word So-yeon didn't know in her vocabulary. Her life had always been a series of limited choices, of necessary sacrifices. The idea of having options, of being able to decide what was best for her mother without the shadow of debt, was almost intoxicating. I don't know what to say," she repeated, her voice still weak. She felt the weight of the documents in her hands, the weight of a new life. Min-jun stood up slowly, indicating that his visit was coming to an end. "Don't say anything, So-yeon-si, just rest. For the first time in a long time, you can allow yourself to rest. I trust that you will make good use of this opportunity." He made a brief bow. "I need to go now. Take care, So-yeon-si. And please don't hesitate to contact the lawyer if you have any questions." He turned to the door, but paused for an instant, looking at her one last time. His eyes met hers, and So-yeon felt a wave of emotion she couldn't decipher: compassion, respect, and something deeper, almost a silent promise. "See you soon, So-yeon-si," he said, and then left, closing the door softly behind him. So-yeon remained seated on the worn sofa, the document still firmly clutched in her hands. The silence in the small room was deafening, broken only by her own muffled sobs. Min-jun's scent, a subtle and elegant fragrance, still lingered in the air, a reminder that he had been there, that all of it was real. She looked at the papers in her hands. The rental agreement, the details of the fund for medical expenses, the guarantee of monthly support. Each line, each word, was a brick in the construction of a new reality. The world she knew, the world of exhaustion, debt, and humiliation, was crumbling, not into ruins, but to make way for something she never dared to dream of. The tears returned, but now they were tears of an almost painful joy, of a relief that left her breathless. She was free. Her mother would be safe. They would have a home. So-yeon brought the documents to her chest, clutching them like a priceless treasure. She closed her eyes, allowing the wave of emotions to wash over her. The seed of hope that Min-jun had planted began to sprout in her heart, timid but undeniable. For the first time in years, Park So-yeon felt that she could breathe. And for the first time, she allowed herself to dream of a future. She was free. Her mother would be safe. They would have a home. Slowly, as if coming out of a trance, So-yeon opened her eyes. Her hands still trembled, but the urgency to understand, to touch the reality of that offer, propelled her. She unfolded the papers with almost reverent care. The rental agreement was for an apartment in the Gangnam district, a place she only knew from bus rides, where the streets were clean and people seemed to live in another world. The address was real, the owner's name, the rent amount, all filled in and signed. And below, a clause stating that the rent would be fully covered by a fund managed by the Lee Group. Her eyes moved to the next document, the details of the fund for medical expenses. There was a substantial amount, more than she could dream of accumulating in a lifetime of work, and a note for exclusive use in medical expenses of Ms. Park Mi-suk, mother of Park So-yeon, including but not limited to hospitalizations, medications, therapies, and hospital transfers. The guarantee that her mother would receive the best possible treatment without the shadow of debt was a balm for her wounded soul. Lastly, the statement of the monthly support fund. An amount that to her was a fortune would be deposited into her account each month. There were no conditions, no demands, just the promise of support so she could rebuild herself. So-yeon reread Min-jun's words. It's not a salary, So-yeon-si. It's support, an investment in your freedom. Freedom. The word echoed in her mind, gaining form and substance. Freedom to no longer bow, to no longer accept humiliations, to no longer have to choose between food and her mother's medicine. Freedom to be herself, to perhaps, for the first time, think about her own desires. A new wave of tears, calmer now, streamed down her face. She felt strangely light, as if an invisible burden she had carried her whole life had finally been removed. The exhaustion was still there, but now it seemed like the exhaustion of a battle won, not of an endless struggle. She thought of her mother. How would she tell her? Her mother, who always worried so much about her, who felt like a burden. The joy this news would bring her mother would be the greatest gift of all. So-yeon imagined her mother's face. The worry lines softened, a genuine smile replacing her tired gaze. The image made her smile through her tears. The clock on the wall ticked, marking the passage of time. But for So-yeon, time had stopped and restarted. She stood up, the document still in her hands, and walked to the window. The city outside seemed the same, but for her, the world had changed. The distant lights were no longer just a reminder of an unattainable life, but an invitation to a future that now seemed possible. Tomorrow, the lawyer, the apartment visit. Everything seemed surreal, but the papers in her hands were irrefutable proof. She would have to be strong, accept this help with the dignity that Min-jun saw in her. She couldn't waste this chance. So-yeon took a deep breath, the fresh night air filling her lungs. For the first time, she felt that the air was not heavy with the dust of hopelessness, but light with the promise of a new dawn. She carefully put away the documents, as if they were the key to a treasure. The night would be long, full of thoughts and emotions, but for the first time in a long time, So-yeon knew that she would fall asleep with hope in her heart. The night was indeed long. So-yeon lay on the hard bed, the documents carefully folded and placed on the bedside table next to her alarm clock. Each time she closed her eyes, Min-jun's words echoed in her mind. The images of the papers danced on her eyelids. It was real. Everything was real. She tossed and turned, her body exhausted, but her mind in a whirlwind of emotions. Fear, relief, gratitude, a pang of disbelief. How could someone do something like this for her? Why him? When the sun began to peek through the gaps in the worn curtain, So-yeon was still awake. It wasn't the usual exhaustion that kept her from sleeping, but a nervous energy, an anticipation she had never felt. She got up, her muscles aching, but with a lightness in her chest she hadn't experienced in a long time. Her eyes immediately turned to the documents. They were still there, tangible, proof that the previous night had not been a feverish dream. She made her usual breakfast, a little rice and kimchi, but barely managed to swallow. Every noise from outside, every vibration of her old phone made her jump. The anxiety of waiting for the lawyer's call was almost unbearable. She wondered what she should do. Should she go to work? Min-jun hadn't told her not to, but the idea of returning to Mrs. Kim's house, of facing the daily humiliations, now seemed an affront to this new chance she had been given. She decided to wait. For the first time, she had the freedom to wait. Around 10 in the morning, the phone rang. So-yeon almost dropped the device. The number was unknown. She answered, her voice a little tremulous. "Good morning. Am I speaking with Ms. Park So-yeon?" The voice on the other end was male, formal and polite. "Yes, this is she," So-yeon replied, her heart pounding. "Ms. Park, my name is Kim Ji-hoon. I am a lawyer for the Lee Group. Mr. Lee Min-jun instructed me to contact you today." The confirmation sent a shiver down her spine. It was truly real. "Ah, yes, Mr. Kim," she managed to say. "Mr. Lee informed me about the details of your situation and the arrangements he wishes to make. I have the documents he gave you last night." Mr. Kim paused briefly. "My first priority is to ensure that Ms. Park Mi-suk, your mother, receives the best possible treatment. Mr. Lee suggested a transfer to Seoul National University Hospital, which has one of the best cardiology units in the country. Do you agree to this transfer?" So-yeon could barely believe it. Seoul National University Hospital was a name she only heard in television dramas, a place of unattainable excellence. "Yes, Mr. Kim. Yes, I fully agree." Her voice choked up. "Excellent. I will handle all the bureaucratic and financial procedures for the transfer. A specialized medical transport vehicle will pick her up from the current hospital tomorrow morning. Would you like to be present? Yes, please. I need to be there. Perfect. I will contact the current hospital to coordinate. Regarding the apartment, the rental agreement is already signed and the first month, along with the security deposit, has already been paid. I would like to schedule a visit with you for tomorrow afternoon after your mother's transfer. Would you be available? Yes, of course, anytime. Great. The address is fictional address in Gangnam. We will meet there at 3 in the afternoon. I will bring the keys, and we will do a brief inspection. The apartment is already furnished and ready to move in. Furthermore, the medical expense fund and monthly support have already been activated. The first deposit will be made into your bank account today. So-yeon felt her eyes well up again. Mr. Kim, I don't know how to thank you. There's no need to thank me, Ms. Park. My job is to ensure that Mr. Lee's instructions are followed and that you and your mother are safe and comfortable. Please don't hesitate to contact me at any time if you have questions or need anything. My number is on the card Mr. Lee gave you. I will. Thank you very much, Mr. Kim. You're welcome, Ms. Park. Have a good day. The call ended. So-yeon stood there, the phone still in her hand. The silence in the room filled only by the buzzing in her ears. Her mother's transfer, the apartment, the money, everything was happening, and faster than she could have imagined. There was no more time for doubts or disbelief. There was only the need to act. She needed to go to the hospital. She needed to tell her mother. The news, she knew, would be a shock, but a shock of joy and relief that her mother deserved. So-yeon picked up her bag, her heart light but determined. The world outside was still the same, but her journey, her life, had just turned a page. And, for the first time, she felt she was in control of her own destiny. The walk to the hospital seemed shorter than usual. Each step was propelled by a sweet urgency, a need to share the news that would transform her mother's life. Upon entering the room, she found Ms. Park Mi-suk lying down, her gaze fixed on the ceiling, a look of weariness So-yeon knew so well. "Oma?" So-yeon called, her voice choked with emotion. Ms. Park turned her head slowly, a faint smile appearing as she saw her daughter. "So-yeona, why aren't you at work?" So-yeon sat on the edge of the bed, taking her mother's wrinkled hand. "Oma, I have something very important to tell you." She took a deep breath, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to overflow. "Mr. Lee Min-jun's lawyer called me. He's arranging your transfer to Seoul National University Hospital tomorrow morning, and all your medical expenses will be covered. Forever." Ms. Park blinked, her smile disappearing, replaced by an expression of confusion. "What, University Hospital? So-yeon, what are you saying? That's impossible. Where would we get the money for that?" "Don't worry about the money, Oma. Mr. Lee, he's taking care of everything. He set up a fund for you, so you can have the best treatment without worrying about anything." So-yeon's tears finally rolled, but they were tears of relief and joy. "You won't have to worry about debts ever again. You'll be all right, Oma. You'll have peace." Ms. Park continued to stare at her, eyes wide, as if So-yeon were speaking a foreign language. But then, slowly, disbelief gave way to a painful understanding, and then to a wave of emotion that mirrored her daughter's. Her eyes also began to well up. "So-yeona, is it true?" Her voice was a whisper, almost inaudible. "It's not a dream, is it?" "It's true, Oma. It's all true." So-yeon squeezed her mother's hand. "And that's not all. He also gave me an apartment in Gangnam, and monthly support so I can take care of you and live without having to humiliate myself anymore." Ms. Park let out a sob, tears streaming freely down her face. "My God, So-yeona, what did you do? You didn't sell yourself, did you?" The fear in her voice was palpable. "No, Oma, never." So-yeon hugged her tightly, feeling her mother's frail body tremble. He said it's an investment in my freedom. He saw my struggle. He wants to help us. It's a gift, Oma. An unexpected gift. Mother and daughter cried together, a crying that washed away years of suffering, fear, and despair. It was a cry of liberation. Ms. Park, for the first time in a long time, felt the weight of the world lifted from her shoulders. She hugged So-yeon with the little strength she had, murmuring thanks and apologies for having been a burden. "You were never a burden, Oma," So-yeon whispered, kissing her mother's forehead. "Never." The next day, Ms. Park's transfer was a display of efficiency. A specialized medical team in a modern ambulance arrived at the hospital. Lawyer Kim Ji-hoon was present, supervising every detail. So-yeon watched, with a lump in her throat, as her mother was carefully transported, her face pale, but with a glint of hope in her eyes. At Seoul National University Hospital, a private room and a team of renowned cardiologists awaited. Everything was impeccable, professional, and So-yeon felt a dignity she never imagined possible in a hospital setting. In the afternoon, So-yeon met Mr. Kim Ji-hoon at the address in Gangnam. The building was imposing, with a uniformed doorman and a luxurious lobby. The apartment, on the 15th floor, was even more surprising. Upon opening the door, So-yeon stopped, breathless. It was a spacious and bright area, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the city. The living room was elegantly furnished with soft sofas, a large screen television, and discreet artwork on the walls. The kitchen was modern, equipped with state-of-the-art appliances. The master bedroom, with a king-size bed and a private bathroom, felt like a sanctuary. "Mr. Lee made sure everything was ready for your arrival, Ms. Park," said Mr. Kim, noticing the shock on her face. "He wanted you to be able to move in immediately and have all the necessary comforts." So-yeon walked through the apartment, touching the furniture, feeling the softness of the carpet. It was more than she had ever dreamed of. It wasn't just a place to live, it was a symbol of a new beginning, of respect, of a life she never thought she could have. "Mr. Kim, I don't know what to say," she murmured, tears again threatening. "There's no need, Ms. Park. Just embrace this new phase of your life. Mr. Lee believes in you." He handed her a set of keys. "These are your keys. If you need anything, my number is on the card. Don't hesitate." After Mr. Kim left, So-yeon was alone in the spacious apartment, the silence filled only by the ticking of a wall clock and the distant hum of the city. She walked to the window, watching the sun set over Seoul's skyscrapers. The golden light bathed the city, and for the first time, So-yeon felt that she was a part of it, not as a shadow, but as a presence. She thought of Lee Min-jun, the man who watched her in silence, who saw her pain and her dignity, and who, without asking for anything in return, extended his hand. He didn't save her from physical danger, but from an existential one, the annihilation of hope. He invited her to a life of respect and care, and she accepted not out of love or passion, but out of deep gratitude and a renewed faith in human kindness. So-yeon took a deep breath, the pure, fresh air filling her lungs. The exhaustion of years of struggle was still in her bones, but now it was an exhaustion that promised rest, no longer despair. She didn't know what the future held, nor what her relationship with Lee Min-jun would mean. But, for the first time, she wasn't afraid. She was free, and with that freedom came the promise of a new dawn where Park So-yeon could finally flourish.